At my husband's family barbecue, my husband's sister made a joke. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would ever notice. Everyone giggled, except me. I only lifted my hot dog and said, "Challenge accepted." I moved out that night, cut contact, and vanished. A year later, they're who's forgotten now. Imagine being told your very existence is utterly irrelevant. Imagine hearing those cruel words from your own husband's sister, followed by a chorus of laughter. And yes, even his laughter. That exact moment didn't just break me, it detonated something deep inside. It set me free, sparking a journey of self-discovery that would not only shake their world to its core, but fundamentally rebuild my own. 7 years I'd spent trying to fit into Liam's family, often feeling like a ghost haunting their opulent, perfectly manicured existence. That summer evening, the air thick with the sweet smoky scent of charcoal and the pungent undertone of false smiles, felt different. I genuinely hoped maybe this time, I'll finally belong. I was so wrong. Liam and I had met during our final year at university. I was Maya, a graphic design student, hustling part-time at a coffee shop, pouring lattes and my life savings into tuition. He was Liam, heir apparent to a business empire, breezing through his degree, bankrolled by Robert and Eleanor. We connected during a late-night study session, amidst the clatter of ceramic mugs and the murmur of conversation, when he noticed the worn copy of 100 Years of Solitude I was devouring behind the counter. Our romance? It was a whirlwind, truly. Within 3 months, we were glued at the hip, a cinematic blur of shared dreams and late-night talks. By graduation, he was on one knee, offering a ring that probably cost more than my entire student debt. I was swept away by his charm, his undeniable intelligence, and what I genuinely believed was profound, lasting love. A year later, we married. I wasn't just gaining a husband. I thought I was gaining a family. The Robertsons, as I now call them in my head, were everything my own humble family wasn't. They were affluent, impossibly well-connected, and tight-knit in their own unique, almost impenetrable way. Robert, Liam's father, was a self-made titan, having built a marketing firm from absolutely nothing. Eleanor, his mother, managed their intricate social calendar with the precision of a military general, somehow juggling 3 charity boards while hosting endless, perfectly curated soirees. Chloe, Liam's sister, was already a junior executive at Robert's company by 27, a shining example of family legacy. And David, the younger brother, was the designated family rebel who still somehow, miraculously, landed a cushy job at his uncle's investment firm. My own background couldn't have been more starkly different. I was raised by a single mother who worked 2 jobs day and night, instilling in me the visceral understanding of a dollar's true worth and the sheer dignity of hard work. My sister, Sophie, and I shared a tiny bedroom until I finally left for college. Holidays weren't about grand events. They were about homemade gifts, the comforting chaos of potluck dinners with our loud, loving neighbors, and a fierce sense of community that money couldn't buy. When I first stepped into the Robertsons' sprawling colonial home, it was like walking onto a meticulously curated movie set. The class differences weren't shouted. They were whispered, insidious, persistent. Eleanor would compliment my graphic design work as if it were a quaint little hobby, never a serious profession. Robert would feel compelled to explain basic business concepts to me over dinner, despite the fact I'd been running my own successful freelance business for years before I even met Liam. And Chloe? Oh, Chloe. Always with that saccharine smile, she'd helpfully correct my pronunciation of obscure wine varieties or designer names I'd never heard of. "They mean well, Maya," Liam would always say, whenever I dared to bring up these infuriating microaggressions. "Chloe's just trying to help you fit in. That's how she shows love." But Chloe's love felt more like a slow, deliberate poison. At our wedding, her maid of honor speech included a jaw-dropping exposé of Liam's ex-girlfriends. When we joyfully announced we were buying our first home, she questioned if the neighborhood was really the right fit for a Robertson. And when I finally landed a major client, a huge win for my burgeoning business, She wondered aloud if they'd hired me because of Liam's family connections. Despite all of it, I tried. God, how I tried. I volunteered for Eleanor's endless charity events, even designing their brochures for free. I referred potential clients to Robert's firm. I meticulously remembered everyone's birthdays, selecting thoughtful, personalized gifts. I forced myself to laugh at their in-jokes, even when the jabs stung deep. I deliberately dressed differently for family gatherings, shedding my own style to adopt their casual elegance. I swallowed my working-class pride, a bitter pill, when conversations inevitably turned to vacation homes in Aspen and exclusive boarding schools. For the first few years, I clung to my freelance design business, slowly building a modest client list and even garnering some local recognition. But then, Liam was offered a huge opportunity, a chance to expand his division at work, requiring extensive travel. Without a single discussion, it was simply assumed I would scale back my career, becoming the dutiful wife, managing our home life. My business, my passion, dwindled to just a few loyal clients. I became increasingly isolated, my world shrinking, narrowing to Liam's intermittent presence and his family's ever-present, judgmental orbit. I was disappearing long before Chloe's cruel joke. Last spring, a silence fell over my world. I miscarried at 11 weeks. The physical pain was excruciating, a raw tearing, but the emotional aftermath? That was a gaping wound. Liam was away in Chicago for a conference. He offered to come home, but the flicker of relief in his eyes when I told him I could manage was unmistakable. A fresh stab of loneliness. Eleanor sent flowers, beautiful, expensive blooms, with a card that read, "Perhaps it's for the best until you're more settled." Settled? Chloe, ever the subtle assassin, even suggested that the stress from trying to maintain my little business might have been a factor. It was my sister, Sophie, who showed up. My rock. She drove all the way, bringing homemade soup, the smell of comfort filling my empty house, and sat with me through countless tear-soaked nights. The stark, almost brutal contrast between her raw, genuine care and my in-laws' clinical, detached distance cracked something fundamental inside me. But I buried it. Deep. Another bitter disappointment to swallow in the endless pursuit of family harmony. By the time the annual summer barbecue rolled around again, I was a diminished version of myself. My design work, once a vibrant expression, had become rote, mechanical. My friendships, neglected, had atrophied. My marriage felt increasingly like a hollow performance. Still, clinging to a fragile thread of hope, I thought, maybe things can still improve. Maybe I can still earn their genuine acceptance. 7 years, and I was still begging for a place at their table. The Robertson Summer Barbecue wasn't just an event, it was a neighborhood institution. Eleanor spent weeks meticulously planning the menu, every detail cataloged, every napkin folded just so. Robert would proudly unveil his latest collection of absurdly expensive grilling gadgets, holding court for dozens of family, friends, and influential business associates who milled about their perfectly manicured lawn. It was the event where family status was openly displayed and ruthlessly reinforced, where loyalties were confirmed with a nod and an exclusive smile, and where outsiders like me were silently but unequivocally identified. And despite 7 years as Liam's wife, I remained firmly, stubbornly, in the outsider category. The morning of the barbecue, I poured 3 painstaking hours into making my grandmother's strawberry shortcake. It was my secret weapon, the only dessert that had ever received genuine compliments in previous years. Liam, oblivious, was buried in calls, finalizing details for his upcoming Tokyo business trip. When it was finally time to leave, he practically rushed me out the door, more concerned with being fashionably late than actually just late. "Remember, Dad's unveiling his new imported smoker today," he reminded me, as if it were a national holiday. "Try to act impressed, even if you don't get why it's a big deal." I just nodded, clutching my dessert carrier, the sundress I'd bought specifically to match Eleanor's preferred casual elegance, already feeling suffocatingly tight across my shoulders. The Robertson home, as usual, bustled with frantic activity when we arrived. Caterers in crisp uniforms navigated through throngs of guests, trays of exotic appetizers, weaving through the crowd. Robert, naturally, stood center stage on the vast patio, surrounded by admiring friends, demonstrating the absurd capabilities of his new smoker. Eleanor floated from one cluster of guests to another, her laugh tinkling like expensive crystal, echoing across the manicured lawn. Then Chloe spotted us. "Maya," she called out, air-kissing Liam with a theatrical flourish. She gave me a swift, dismissive once-over. "That dress is just so cheerful. The kitchen's getting terribly crowded, but I'm sure you can find somewhere to put your contribution." Before I could even form a response, she swept Liam away, linking her arm through his, already launching into an animated story about running into his college roommate. I stood there, dessert in hand, utterly alone, scanning the sea of unfamiliar faces for a single friendly one. I made my way to the chaotic kitchen, where Eleanor was orchestrating the catering staff with military precision. "Oh, Maya, dear," she said, finally noticing me hovering in the doorway. Her voice was laced with an almost imperceptible condescension. "You really didn't need to bring anything. We have the patisserie handling desserts." She gestured vaguely towards a pantry already overflowing with gourmet treats. "But how thoughtful. Perhaps put it there for now." I placed my precious shortcake onto a lonely shelf, already crowded with other contributions from guests, clearly deemed not worthy of public display. As I exited, I overheard Eleanor instructing a server to proudly make room for Chloe's authentic tiramisu at the very center of the dessert table. A fresh wave of cold shame washed over me. Always Chloe. The next 2 hours blurred into a suffocating cycle of polite smiles and truncated conversations. I tried to chat with one of Liam's cousins, only for Eleanor to swoop in and whisk them away to meet someone important. I offered to help set up the buffet, only to be told, "Oh, darling, the caterers have a system." I even attempted to join a conversation about recent films, but couldn't wedge a single word in edgewise. Yet Isabella, David's wife, who'd only been married into the family for 2 years, received an entirely different reception. Eleanor proudly introduced her to everyone as our Isabella, the brilliant pediatric surgeon. Chloe included her in warm reminiscences about family vacations Isabella couldn't possibly have attended. Even Robert, usually distant with in-laws, asked detailed, genuinely interested questions about her work. The glaring contrast wasn't lost on me. Nor was the irony that Isabella looked almost as uncomfortable with all the effusive attention as I was with its complete absence. When lunchtime finally arrived, Liam reappeared at my side, having spent the entire morning engrossed in conversation with Robert's business associates. "Having fun?" he asked, not bothering to wait for an answer, before steering me towards the elaborate buffet line. We filled our plates and joined the main table on the patio. I ended up seated between Liam's elderly Uncle Frank, who was charmingly hard of hearing, and a strategically left open space for Chloe, who was still serving herself. Liam sat across from me, already deep in conversation with Robert about Japanese business etiquette. Chloe finally arrived, placing her meticulously arranged plate down and instantly commanding the table's full attention with an anecdote about a celebrity she'd spotted at her gym. Isabella asked all the appropriate questions. Eleanor beamed with maternal pride. Even Uncle Frank leaned in, straining to hear her better. During a brief lull, I saw my chance. "I just finished a branding project for that new bakery downtown," I offered, my voice a little too eager. "They're having their grand opening next weekend." Chloe's eyes, sharp and calculating, narrowed slightly. "How nice. Is that the place with the tacky neon sign? I drove past it yesterday. The signage is actually vintage-inspired," I patiently explained, my voice tight. "The owners wanted to honor the building's history, one of the first." "If you disappeared tomorrow," Chloe interrupted, cutting me off with a dramatic, theatrical sigh, "no one would even notice." That's how boring this conversation is. The table erupted in laughter. Eleanor tittered delicately behind her napkin. Robert guffawed, a loud, booming sound. Even Liam chuckled, reaching for his beer, completely oblivious to the dagger that had just pierced me. Uncle Frank, who likely hadn't heard a word, joined in automatically, his laughter innocent. The sound surrounded me like cold water, shocking my system, freezing me in place. I felt simultaneously hypervisible, every eye on me, and utterly invisible, my worth stripped away. My face burned with humiliation, but my hands turned ice cold, trembling slightly. In that excruciating moment, 7 years of accumulated slights, microaggressions, and dismissals crystallized into perfect, undeniable clarity. I didn't cry. I didn't storm off, not dramatically, not hysterically. I didn't create a scene that they would later recount as evidence of Maya's emotional instability. Instead, I slowly raised my hot dog in a mock toast, met Chloe's smug gaze directly, and said, clearly, firmly, challenge accepted. A brief, confused silence fell over the table. Chloe's triumphant smile faltered, just for a split second. Liam looked between us, sensing something had shifted, a seismic tremor, but utterly unable to identify what. Then Eleanor, ever the social conductor, chirped, "Who's ready for Robert to carve the brisket?" And just like that, the moment passed. The knife plunged into the meat, slicing through the tension I alone felt. For the rest of that endless afternoon, I observed. I became an anthropologist of my own life, meticulously documenting every interaction. I watched how effortlessly they all navigated their world, a world built on assumed privilege and an unquestioned sense of belonging. I noted how Liam, my husband, seamlessly blended with his family, occasionally tossing me an absent, dismissive smile. I cataloged every single slight, every exclusion, every moment I was spoken over or around, each memory a tiny, sharp shard. Most importantly, though, I finally listened. I listened to that quiet, persistent voice inside me, the one that had been whispering for years, gentle at first, then growing louder, now a roar. You deserve better than this. By the time we finally gathered our things to leave, amidst the lingering smells of barbecue and the fading chatter, my decision was unequivocally made. The only question left was, how? How do I implement this escape? The drive home from the barbecue stretched into a heavy, suffocating silence. Liam, oblivious, checked emails on his phone, occasionally reading aloud snippets about his upcoming Tokyo business trip. His voice was a distant hum. I stared out the window, watching the suburban landscape blur past, my mind a storm of furious, frantic calculations, all hidden beneath a facade of outward calm. When we finally pulled into our driveway, he seemed to notice my unusual quiet for the first time. "Everything okay? You've been off since lunch." I considered my words, carefully, deliberately. Chloe's joke about me disappearing. "Did you think that was funny?" Liam sighed, a sound of weary exasperation, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Don't start with this again, Maya. Chloe was just being Chloe. You know how she gets at family gatherings." "You laughed," I stated simply, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "It was a joke, Maya. Not everything needs to be analyzed to death." He got out of the car, slamming the door, effectively ending the conversation, but igniting a fire in me. That night, as Liam slept soundly beside me, completely oblivious, I stared at the ceiling. I replayed not just the day's brutal events, but the entire slow, suffocating trajectory of our marriage. I thought of the bright, ambitious designer I'd been when we first met. I remembered how confidently I'd handled clients, the sheer passion I'd felt for my work, the deep, authentic connections I'd forged with friends. Somewhere along the way, incrementally, insidiously, I'd started believing the subtle, pervasive message the Robertsons had been sending, that I was lucky to be among them, that my inclusion was conditional on my absolute compliance, that my very worth was determined only by their assessment. I slipped out of bed at 2 a.m., the house silent around me, and padded to my home office. My laptop screen illuminated my face. I began methodical research, bank accounts, apartment listings in Seattle, where Sophie lived, transportation options one way. Tickets. By dawn, a rudimentary, thrillingly terrifying plan had taken shape. Liam left for a morning golf game with Robert, kissing me absently on his way out, a fleeting brush against my cheek. The moment his car pulled away, the tires crunching on the gravel, I began executing my plan with a surprising, almost surgical clarity. First, I called Ashley, my college roommate, who had remained fiercely loyal despite my increasing isolation. "Ashley," I said, my voice steady, "I need a massive favor." "Name it," she replied, without a flicker of hesitation. "I'm leaving Liam today. Can you come help me pack the essentials?" 2 hours later, Ashley arrived, armed with coffee, packing supplies, and a fierce, unspoken determination in her eyes. We worked like a well-oiled machine, efficiently, silently, identifying what I truly needed versus what could be replaced. Clothes, personal documents, irreplaceable mementos, and my precious design equipment took absolute priority. "I can store whatever doesn't fit in your car at my place," Ashley offered, gently wrapping a framed photo of my mother and me. While Ashley organized the physical items, I tackled the daunting financial separation. I transferred exactly half of our joint savings into my personal account, not a penny more, not a penny less. Despite the overwhelming temptation to drain it all, I meticulously paid my share of the monthly bills that were due. I compiled a comprehensive list of subscriptions and services to transfer or cancel. By mid-afternoon, my car was packed, the trunk filled with the distilled essence of my life, a physical manifestation of my impending freedom. Ashley hugged me fiercely, a silent acknowledgement of the bravery I was summoning, before getting into her own vehicle. "Call me when you're settled for the night, Maya. And know this, I'm so proud of you." Alone in what had been our home for 5 long years, a house that now felt alien, I wrote Liam a letter. I kept it simple, direct, stating that I needed time away to reevaluate our marriage. I reiterated that I had taken only what was indisputably mine and had contributed to all outstanding bills. I asked for space, for no contact, while I sorted through my feelings. I absolutely did not, share my destination. As a final, defiant act, I removed my wedding ring, placing it carefully atop the letter on the kitchen counter. Next to it, I left a copy of Chloe's cruel joke, written verbatim. "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." I added the date and location clinically, as if it were an official decree. Before walking out, I allowed myself one moment of raw sentimentality. I picked up our wedding photo from the hall table. We looked so happy then, so full of possibility, brimming with a naive hope. Liam's smile reached his eyes back then, truly. My own face shone with a hope and confidence I barely recognized now. "Goodbye," I whispered, replacing the frame, a silent farewell to a life that had never truly been mine. Then, without looking back, I walked out the door. The sensation of driving away from our sterile suburban neighborhood was a dizzying cocktail of terror and exhilaration. With each passing mile marker, the suffocating tightness in my chest loosened, incrementally, until I could finally, truly breathe. By the time I crossed the state line, a profound sense of lightness settled over me, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. I checked into a modest hotel that evening, using the credit card I'd secretly maintained throughout our marriage. The room was simple, clean, utterly devoid of the ostentatious luxury the Robertsons considered standard. After confirming my safe arrival with both Ashley and Sophie, I switched off my phone. Liam would be home by now, finding an empty closet, the stark silence of the house, and my letter. The thought brought neither satisfaction nor guilt, only a strange, all-encompassing numbness. In the quiet anonymity of that hotel room, I curled under unfamiliar blankets and fell into the deepest, most restorative sleep I'd had in months. Morning brought the first frantic wave of messages when I briefly dared to switch on my phone. Liam's communications unfolded exactly as I'd anticipated, a predictable progression: confusion, then irritation, then feigned concern, finally escalating to simmering anger. "Where are you?
Call me.
This is ridiculous.
Come home so we can talk.
Your mother is worried. At least let her know you're safe. You're being incredibly selfish right now." I have the Tokyo trip in 3 days.
Fine. Take your space.
We'll talk when I get back. Not once, not a single time, did he mention Chloe's cruel joke or his own gut-wrenching laughter. Not once did he acknowledge any understanding of why I might have done this. I sent a brief, detached text to my mother, assuring her of my safety, but firmly requesting privacy. Then, I turned off my phone again and opened my laptop, eyes fixed on the screen, searching for longer-term accommodations in Seattle. The challenge had been accepted. Now came the excruciatingly hard part, disappearing not just physically, but meticulously untangling myself from the identity I'd painstakingly constructed as Liam Robertson's wife. I was about to discover if Chloe had been right, if my absence would go completely unnoticed, or if I could, against all odds, rebuild a life where my presence mattered, on my own terms. Seattle welcomed me with 3 days of continuous, cleansing rain, as if washing away the residue of my old life. Sophie, my incredible sister, had found me a month-to-month furnished apartment in her vibrant neighborhood, a tiny studio with charming bay windows and creaking floors. After the sprawling, impersonal suburban house Liam and I had shared, this compact space, by all accounts, should have felt claustrophobic. Instead, it felt like a snug, protective cocoon. The building's nothing fancy, Sophie apologized as she helped me carry in my limited belongings. But the location is great, and the landlord doesn't ask too many questions. It's perfect, I assured her, running my hand along the worn but solid kitchen counter. It's just mine. That first week dissolved into a blur of practical arrangements. I opened a new bank account at a local credit union. I set up mail forwarding through Ashley, ensuring no direct trail back to me. I bought a new phone with a Seattle area code, a small but significant symbol of my new independence. I painstakingly created updated profiles on freelance design platforms, carefully curating my portfolio to remove any work even remotely connected to Liam's extensive network. Every step was deliberate, a brick in the foundation of my new self. Liam's messages continued their predictable pattern, slowly transitioning from indignant anger to desperate bargaining. "Whatever's going on, we can work through it," he wrote. "Just come home." I maintained my resolute silence, not out of cruelty, but pure, primal self-preservation. Every single time I considered responding, every time a flicker of doubt threatened to derail me, I replayed the sound of that laughter around the picnic table, the echo of Chloe's venomous words, the countless years of subtle diminishment, the insidious, gradual erosion of my very identity. Chloe, never one to miss a moment for passive aggression, posted an Instagram story 2 weeks after my departure. "Family is everything. You can't choose who stays and who goes." The comments, predictably, overflowed with heart emojis from a slew of Robertson connections, a digital echo chamber of their solidarity. Liam's mother, Eleanor, even called my mother, feigning theatrical concern while subtly fishing for information. Isabella, David's wife, sent a tentative text. "If you ever want to talk, I'm here." I responded to none of them. My focus was singular, absolute, rebuilding. Ashley, my steadfast friend, shipped the remainder of my belongings in anonymous, unmarked boxes. I found a therapist, Dr. Evans, specializing in family dynamics and marital trauma. Our weekly sessions often left me emotionally drained, raw, but incrementally, undeniably stronger. What Chloe said at the barbecue, Dr. Evans commented during our third session, her voice calm and insightful. "That wasn't the cause of your departure, Maya. It was the catalyst, the absolute last straw." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "Yes," I agreed, "the last straw." "Tell me about the first straw," she prompted, her gaze unwavering. That simple question unlocked a devastating flood of memories, subtle digs disguised as helpful advice, achievements minimized, opinions dismissed, all while Liam stood by, not malicious, no, but utterly complicit in his silence. By month 2 in Seattle, a quiet victory, I had secured 3 steady design clients through online platforms. The work wasn't particularly groundbreaking, mostly formatting ebooks and designing social media templates, but it paid the bills. More importantly, each completed project was a tiny, crucial brick in the foundation of my professional confidence, slowly rebuilding what had been so thoroughly dismantled. One rainy Tuesday, the kind of day Seattle specializes in, I walked into a local coffee shop and was immediately captivated by a striking wall mural, a riot of color and intricate detail. The barista, noticing my lingering gaze, smiled. "Beautiful, right?" "The owner commissioned it from a local artist," she explained, preparing my latte. "She's actually looking for someone to redesign our menu boards and promotional materials." An hour later, I was sitting across from Lena Matthews, the co-owner, a woman with a shock of silver-streaked hair and a straightforward, no-nonsense manner that I found instantly refreshing. "I don't care about your resume," she said, waving away the meticulously prepared portfolio I'd pulled up on my tablet. "Show me your personal work, the stuff you do, because you can't not do it." I hesitated, my heart thumping, then navigated to a hidden folder on my tablet, one I'd barely opened in years. These were designs I'd created purely for myself, experimental, sometimes impractical, but raw, authentic, mine. Lena studied them in silence, occasionally zooming in on a tiny detail. "You've been hiding," she finally stated, looking up, her sharp blue eyes piercing. "These are good. Really good. But recent." "No," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "I haven't done work like this in years." "Why not?" The question was simple, direct, but it struck me like a physical blow, a sudden, painful clarity. I found myself telling Lena an abbreviated version of my story, the vibrant creative passion I'd once possessed, the gradual, insidious sublimation of my style to suit the Robertson aesthetic, the slow surrender of my artistic voice. Lena listened, completely without interruption, then simply nodded once. "You're hired for the menu project," she said, "but on one condition. You do one personal piece, something purely your own, every single week. Bring it when we meet. I don't care if it's good or finished. I care that you're finding your voice again." Lena became more than a client. She became a lifeline, a mentor, pushing me to reclaim my creative courage with blunt feedback and fiercely unexpected encouragement. Through her, I connected with other local business owners desperately needing design work. My calendar slowly, joyously, filled with projects that engaged me, rather than relentlessly depleting my spirit. Meanwhile, Liam's attempts at contact grew less frequent, his initial confusion and anger giving way to a weary silence. The divorce papers I filed through my lawyer were initially met with a barrage of calls from him that I simply did not answer. Eventually, his attorney connected with mine. The proceedings moved forward with a clinical, almost detached efficiency. Liam's initial resistance, his protestations, slowly dissolved, giving way to a grudging resignation. For months into my new life, a year after Chloe's barb, I allowed myself, just once, to check social media. Liam's profile showed him at a company event, smiling stiffly beside a woman I didn't recognize. Robert had posted about the Tokyo expansion, tagging Liam with proud father emojis. Chloe, of course, shared multiple photos from a family dinner, captioned, "Missing no one." The confirmation stung, yes, but less than I expected. Chloe had been right after all. My disappearance had barely caused a ripple in the vast, self-contained Robertson family pond. And somehow, this validation brought not pain, but a profound sense of liberation. I was no longer defined by their perceptions, by their narrow, judgmental gaze. 6 months to the day after leaving, I received the finalized divorce papers. Liam had signed them without contesting the straightforward division of assets. We negotiated everything through our lawyers, a clean split of joint property, no alimony either way. Complete separation going forward. His only personal communication was a brief, almost mechanical note. "I still don't understand, but I won't fight you anymore." That evening, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror and, with a surge of defiant exhilaration, cut my hair. I shed the long, classic style Liam had always preferred for a modern, edgy bob that perfectly framed my face. The woman who stared back seemed both familiar and thrillingly new, thinner, perhaps, with faint lines around her eyes, but with a clarity of gaze, a spark of self-possession I hadn't seen in years. This was my face. This was me. By month 8, my design business had flourished enough to demand a dedicated workspace outside my cozy apartment. I rented a desk in a vibrant cooperative creative studio, buzzing with other independent artists and entrepreneurs. For the first time since college, I had colleagues who genuinely valued my input, who challenged my ideas, and who saw me as an equal. When the anniversary of my departure approached, a full year since that fateful barbecue, I no longer felt the compulsion to check social media to track the Robertsons. They had receded from my daily thoughts, slowly transforming into characters in a story I'd survived, rather than active, oppressive presences in my life. Meanwhile, my new world continued its exhilarating expansion. A branding project for a local artisan food company won regional recognition, a thrilling validation of my authentic style. My redesign of Lena's coffee shop attracted the coveted attention of a major lifestyle magazine. A simple comment I made during a design workshop led to an unexpected invitation to speak at a creative conference. 1 year after Chloe's fateful, cutting joke, I was no longer invisible. I had meticulously built a life where my presence wasn't just noticed, but profoundly valued, where my voice was heard, truly heard, rather than callously interrupted, where my contributions were recognized, genuinely appreciated, rather than dismissed. The challenge had been met, but the story I was about to discover was far from over. The email from Westwood Creative arrived, like a perfectly timed cosmic joke, exactly 52 weeks after that barbecue changed everything. The subject line was innocuously professional, seeking designer for national campaign. But the content sent a dizzying jolt through my entire system. Your work for Rainer Artisanal Foods caught our attention. We're developing a campaign for Sheffield consumer brands and believe your aesthetic would be perfect for the project. Initial meeting next week if interested. Sheffield Consumer Brands. It took a moment for the name to click, to reverberate in my mind. It was a subsidiary of Robertson Marketing Group, Roberts Company. The coincidence felt too precise, too deliberate to be accidental. My stomach clenched. I immediately called Lena, who had become my trusted sounding board over the past year. It could be completely legitimate, she reasoned pragmatically after I'd frantically explained the connection. Your Rainer campaign was featured in 3 industry publications, Maya. But the timing is just so suspicious. I finished, my voice tight. The question isn't whether they know who you are, Lena said, ever the realist. The question is whether the project is worth taking, regardless. I requested more information from Westwood Creative. The project was substantial, a complete redesign of packaging for Sheffield's entire organic line, with a potential long-term contract for ongoing brand management. The proposed budget? Double anything I'd handled since establishing my Seattle business. After 3 days of intense deliberation, battling my own fears and pride, I accepted the initial meeting. If this was some intricate Robertson orchestration, I wanted to face it directly, head-on, rather than constantly wondering. And if it was truly legitimate, I refused to let the lingering shadow of my past constrain my burgeoning future. Ethan, the Westwood creative director, gave no indication that he knew about my tangled history with the Robertsons. Our first meeting was refreshingly straightforward. We discussed design concepts, timelines, expectations, and budget particulars with pure, unadulterated professionalism. When I cautiously asked about client involvement, he simply mentioned that Sheffield executives would review major milestones. I accepted the project, establishing clear, non-negotiable boundaries around communication channels and approval processes. For 3 weeks, everything proceeded with satisfying normality. My preliminary designs received overwhelmingly positive feedback. The timeline remained perfectly on track. No Robertson names appeared on any correspondence. Then came the announcement. Sheffield Consumer Brands would be the star of the annual Marketing Innovation Gala, unveiling their rebranded organic line as the centerpiece of the presentation. As the lead designer, my attendance was not just encouraged, it was paramount. The gala was a colossal industry event, precisely the type of high-profile opportunity my rebuilding career desperately needed. It was also, of course, exactly the sort of function the Robertsons never missed. Robert considered these exclusive networking evenings essential to maintaining the family's business prominence, and Liam had always dutifully, almost slavishly, followed his lead. "You have three options, Maya," Dr. Evans observed during our session that week, her voice calm and steady. "Decline to attend and potentially limit your professional growth. Attend and attempt to avoid the Robertsons, which may prove stressful and ultimately futile. Or attend and prepare to engage with them on your terms." "What would you do?" I asked, genuinely curious, a tremor in my voice. Dr. Evans smiled faintly. "I'm more interested in what Maya today would do, as opposed to the Maya from a year ago." The question lingered, resonating deep within me as I left her office. Last year's Maya would have either declined the event entirely, retreating into the shadows, or attended as Liam's apprehensive shadow, dreading Chloe's barbed comments and Eleanor's conditional, chilling approval. But I wasn't that person anymore. The following morning, I emailed Ethan, confirming my attendance. Then, with a surge of defiant exhilaration, I made an appointment with a personal stylist recommended by Sophie and set aside a portion of the Sheffield advance payment for an outfit that would serve as both armor and announcement. The evening of the gala arrived with an unexpected, almost surreal calmness. I surveyed my reflection in the hotel room mirror. The woman staring back wore a tailored jumpsuit in deep, rich emerald, a color that managed to be both sophisticated and strikingly distinctive amidst a sea of predictable black dresses. My bobbed hair now gleamed with subtle caramel highlights. The designer shoes, my one significant splurge, added 3 inches of pure, unadulterated confidence to my height. Most transformative, however, was the expression in my eyes. No anxiety, no apology, just a steady, resolute readiness for whatever the night might bring. The venue was a gorgeously restored historic theater downtown, its grand lobby transformed with strategic, almost ethereal lighting and minimalist floral arrangements. I checked in at the registration desk, accepting my name badge, a beacon of my professional identity, and the signature cocktail offered by circulating waitstaff. I had barely taken 2 sips when Ethan appeared at my elbow, already introducing me to a cluster of influential industry executives. Their business cards, a flurry of potential, disappeared into my clutch as we discussed emerging design trends and market demographics. I found myself speaking with an easy, natural authority, my opinions met with thoughtful nods rather than the polite, dismissive smiles I'd endured for years. 40 minutes into the event, I was deep in an engaging conversation with a magazine editor when I felt an almost imperceptible shift in the room's energy. I didn't need to turn to know. Robert's booming, unmistakable laugh confirmed it moments later. The Robertsons had arrived. I maintained my position, finishing my point about consumer psychology, with deliberate calm before excusing myself to visit the bar. As I waited for a sparkling water, I carefully scanned the room, a predator observing its prey. Robert and Eleanor stood near the entrance, holding court, basking in the admiring glow of their entourage. Chloe wasn't immediately visible. And then I saw Liam. He stood slightly apart from his parents, looking thinner than I remembered, almost diminished, despite his impeccably tailored suit. Our eyes met across the crowded space. His widened in unmistakable shock, his lips parting slightly as if to speak, despite the considerable distance between us. I held his gaze steadily, neither smiling nor frowning, my expression unreadable, then deliberately turned my attention back to the bartender, thanking him for my drink. The first direct encounter came minutes later. Robert approached while I was examining the event program, my back to the room. "Maya," he said, his tone conveying neither warmth nor outright hostility, just a flat surprise. "Quite a surprise, Robert." I nodded, meeting his gaze directly, my voice calm. "I'm the lead designer for Sheffield's organic rebrand." He blinked, momentarily disconcerted by my utterly composed demeanor. I hadn't made the connection. Their creative is being handled externally through Westwood. "Yes," I confirmed, I'm working with Ethan's team. The preliminary market testing has been quite positive. I spoke as I would to any client executive, professional, assured, utterly unruffled. I see. He seemed to reassess me, his eyes scanning, noting the undeniable changes a year had wrought. Your work has evolved since you left. Not evolved, I corrected him with a small, knowing smile. Returned to its authentic direction. Robert shifted uncomfortably, a rare display. Eleanor is here somewhere. I'm sure she'd want to say hello. Of course, I replied, neither encouraging nor discouraging the prospect. As Robert moved away, presumably to report his startling discovery to the family, I rejoined the Westwood team, seamlessly integrating into their conversation about upcoming presentation logistics. From the corner of my eye, I could see the ripple effect as Robert spoke to Eleanor, whose perfectly maintained composure slipped momentarily as her head snapped up, frantically seeking me in the surging crowd. The game was on. The Sheffield presentation was strategically scheduled for the middle of the evening, a prime slot. As the time approached, Ethan guided me toward the staging area. We were nearly there when Chloe stepped directly into our path, her expression a complex, unsettling mixture of surprise and cold calculation. Maya, she said, her tone dripping with suspicion, no one mentioned you were involved with this project. Her voice subtly suggested this oversight was, somehow, entirely my fault. Chloe, I acknowledged, my voice even. I'm working with Westwood Creative. Ethan, this is Chloe Robertson, Robert's daughter. Ethan, ever the professional, extended his hand. Miss Robertson, pleasure to meet you. Maya has been exceptional to work with. He paused then, with a subtle emphasis, added, you know her work. Chloe's smile tightened, a barely perceptible flicker. We're family, actually. Or were. How nice, Ethan replied, his tone perfectly noncommittal. Excuse us. We need to prepare for the presentation. As we walked away, Ethan glanced at me questioningly, but his respect for my privacy was immense. He didn't pry. I appreciated his professionalism more than he could ever know. The presentation itself passed in a focused, exhilarating blur. I spoke about design philosophy and deep consumer connection, demonstrated key elements of the rebranding strategy, and answered questions with composed expertise. The audience response was overwhelmingly positive, punctuated by several spontaneous rounds of applause. From my position on stage, bathed in the spotlight, I could see the entire Robertson family seated together near the front. Eleanor maintained a flawlessly neutral expression throughout, a mask. Robert nodded occasionally at particularly impressive metrics, a grudging acknowledgement. Chloe whispered something to the woman beside her, her face an unreadable enigma. Liam watched me with an almost painful, undisguised intensity, his eyes never, not once, leaving my face. After the formal presentation concluded, I was immediately swarmed by attendees with questions, compliments, and genuine interest. Business cards were exchanged, potential opportunities mentioned, connections established. This professional validation, earned entirely through my own merit, felt like the sweetest, most profound vindication imaginable. Eventually, the crowd thinned as people gravitated towards the dinner portion of the evening. I was gathering my presentation materials, the hum of success still thrumming through me, when Liam finally approached.
Alone.
You look well, he offered, his hands tucked awkwardly in his pockets, a shadow of the confident man I once knew. Thank you, I replied simply, my voice calm, steady. I didn't know you were in Seattle. That was intentional, he nodded, accepting this truth without argument. Your presentation was impressive. You always were talented. I always am talented, I corrected gently, a small, knowing smile touching my lips. Present tense. Liam looked down, then back up, his eyes holding an unexpected, raw directness. I've thought a lot about what happened, about Chloe's joke and everything before that. I didn't understand it at first, not really. But this past year has been... He paused, searching for words, a flicker of genuine introspection. Clarifying. I'm glad to hear that, I said, meaning it, a soft wave of empathy washing over me. "I miss you," he admitted quietly. The words hung between us, once so desperately desired, a desperate plea in a void, but now they arrived too late. I felt no triumph in his regret, no vindictive pleasure in his loneliness, just a calm, quiet certainty that I'd made the right choice. "I need to join my team for dinner," I said, neither cruel nor encouraging, just stating a fact. "Will you be at tomorrow's workshop?" "Yes, I'm presenting the digital integration segment." He nodded again, his eyes still fixed on mine. "Maybe we could get coffee afterward? Just to talk." I considered his request, weighing it against my own hard-won emotional landscape. "I can spare half an hour," I conceded. Professional courtesy. Relief, a profound, almost childlike relief, flickered across his face. "Thank you." As I turned to leave, Eleanor suddenly appeared at Liam's elbow, her signature social smile firmly, almost aggressively, in place. "Maya, darling," she purred, her voice sweet as poison. "What an absolute delight to see you thriving." Her words were perfectly constructed, but her tone, a barely contained tremor, betrayed her discomfort, her shock. "Eleanor," I acknowledged, my own voice calm, steady. "I hope you're well." "Oh, we've all missed you at family gatherings," she continued, the practiced life falling easily from her perfectly painted lips. "No one makes strawberry shortcake quite like yours." The old Maya would have, without question, accepted this disingenuous olive branch, grateful for any crumb of acknowledgement. The new Maya held her ground. "That's interesting," I replied, my tone pleasant, almost conversational. "I recall my shortcake being relegated to the pantry, while Chloe's tiramisu took center stage at the last gathering I attended." Eleanor's perfect smile faltered, just for a brief, telling moment, before snapping back into place. "A simple misunderstanding, I'm sure." "Multiple simple misunderstandings over 7 years," I agreed, maintaining my pleasant, unwavering tone. How fortunate that I now work in environments where such misunderstandings rarely occur. Before Eleanor could formulate another response, the event coordinator's voice boomed, announcing dinner seating. I excused myself with polite finality, turning away from Liam and Eleanor, and joining the Westwood team at their assigned table, strategically positioned across the room from the Robertsons. The remainder of the evening passed without further direct interaction, though I occasionally caught Liam watching me from afar, a lingering, unreadable gaze. As the event concluded, I politely declined the team's invitation for after-party drinks, preferring the quiet, profound completion of returning to my hotel room alone. In the tranquil privacy of my room, I kicked off my impossibly expensive designer shoes, a small act of rebellion, and stood at the window, gazing out at the glittering city lights. The confrontation I'd half-dreaded, half-anticipated for months had finally come and gone, leaving me not depleted, not exhausted, but powerfully strengthened. I had faced the Robertsons not as an apologetic outsider, but as a successful, autonomous professional in my own right. Chloe's insidious challenge, "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice," had precipitated not just my physical departure, but a complete, radical reinvention. The final, exquisite irony was that by disappearing from their suffocating world, I had become undeniably, triumphantly, more visible in my own. The morning after the gala dawned with an unexpected, almost symbolic sunshine streaming through my hotel room curtains. I prepared for the day's workshop with methodical focus, selecting a professional yet comfortable outfit and reviewing my presentation notes over a quiet, restorative room service coffee. The Sheffield marketing workshop was being held in the hotel's conference center, a far more intimate, focused setting than the dazzling spectacle of the previous night's gala. As I meticulously arranged my materials at the presenter table, I spotted Robert engaged in what appeared to be an intense, though not tense, conversation with Ethan near the refreshment station. Occasionally, Robert would nod or gesture towards the product displays, already strategizing. Attendees gradually filtered in, networking over pastries and coffee, the gentle hum of industry chatter filling the room. I was reviewing my slide deck one final time when Chloe entered, her gaze sweeping the room with calculated casualness until it landed squarely on me. After a moment's deliberate hesitation, she approached, her coffee cup clutched, perhaps a little too tightly. "Good morning," she offered, her tone carefully neutral, like a tightly wound spring. "Ethan speaks very highly of your work." "Ethan is an excellent creative director," I replied, my voice calm, professional. "The entire Westwood team has been exceptional." Chloe shifted her weight slightly, an almost imperceptible discomfort in her stance. "I didn't realize you'd established yourself in Seattle. Your presentation last night was impressive." Coming from Chloe, this reluctant acknowledgement was, in its own twisted way, practically effusive praise. I thanked her with simple courtesy, neither overreacting to the rare compliment nor dismissing it. "Father is considering bringing the entire Sheffield account in-house after this campaign," she continued, her eyes watching me, sharp and calculating. "He's been very impressed with the direction." I understood the subtext immediately, a familiar, chilling logic. If Sheffield became a direct Robertson marketing client, my work would either disappear entirely, swallowed by their internal team, or be blandly attributed to their in-house efforts. The old insecurity flickered, a phantom pain, before I firmly, decisively extinguished it. "That would be Robert's prerogative as Sheffield's parent company," I said evenly, meeting her gaze. "However, Westwood has contractual provisions regarding creative attribution that are quite specific. Ethan is particularly careful about protecting his designer's work." Chloe's expression tightened, almost imperceptibly. Before she could respond, the workshop facilitator called for everyone to take their seats. Our conversation ended with mutual, professional nods, a stark, almost unbelievable contrast to our last interaction over hot dogs and cruel jokes. The morning sessions proceeded efficiently, a whirlwind of presentations on market analysis and consumer demographics. My segment, on digital integration strategies, was scheduled just before the lunch break. As I took the podium, I noticed Liam slipping into the back of the room, clearly having timed his arrival for my presentation. I delivered my content with confident expertise, demonstrating how the packaging designs seamlessly incorporated augmented reality features and connected to the broader digital ecosystem. The question period afterward was lively, filled with engaged participants and thoughtful discussion. When Robert himself asked about implementation timelines, I answered with specific benchmarks already agreed upon with the Sheffield team, my mastery of the material undeniable. As attendees broke for lunch, Liam made his way towards me, but was intercepted by a Sheffield executive with urgent questions. I used the opportunity, almost craving it, to step outside for fresh air, needing a moment away from the gravitational pull of the Robertsons. The hotel's courtyard garden provided a quiet, green respite. I had just settled onto a bench when Eleanor appeared on the pathway, her expression suggesting our meeting wasn't accidental in the slightest. "You've always had excellent timing for escapes," she observed, smoothing her skirt as she sat beside me, utterly uninvited. "I prefer to call it recognizing when I need space," I replied, my voice calm and yielding. Eleanor studied me with new attention, a genuine curiosity in her eyes. "You've changed." "I've reverted," I corrected, a small, knowing smile on my lips, to the person I was before I started trying to fit into spaces that weren't designed for me. She sighed lightly, a practiced, long-suffering sound. "Families are complicated, Maya, especially established ones like ours. There are expectations, traditions, ways things have always been done." "I'm aware," I countered. "I spent 7 years observing those traditions. 7 years trying to meet those expectations. Perhaps we weren't always as welcoming as we could have been," Eleanor conceded, her voice softer, almost an admission. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from her. But disappearing without a word was rather dramatic, don't you think? I turned to face her directly, my gaze unwavering. "I left a detailed letter for Liam. I ensured all financial obligations were properly handled. I made a clear, adult decision to remove myself from a situation that had become harmful to my well-being. There was nothing dramatic about it." "Liam was devastated," she countered, a touch of genuine hurt in her tone. "Liam was inconvenienced," I corrected gently. There's a difference. Eleanor's perfectly maintained facade cracked, just slightly, revealing a hint of raw emotion. You have no idea what this past year has been like for him. For all of us. You're right, I acknowledged. Just as you have no idea what the previous 7 years were like for me. We sat in a tense silence for a moment before I continued, my voice firm. But I'm not interested in exchanging pain metrics, Eleanor. That's not why I'm here. I'm here because I'm good at what I do, and my work has value to Sheffield's campaign. Something shifted in Eleanor's expression. Not quite respect, not yet, but perhaps a new, dawning awareness. You always were stubborn. Determined, I countered, with another small, confident smile. Another distinction worth noting. As we headed back towards the conference center, Eleanor asked an unexpected question. Will you be at the closing dinner tonight? Yes, Westwood has a table. She nodded thoughtfully. The salmon is usually excellent. It was such a normal, mundane observation, the kind mothers-in-law typically share with daughters-in-law, that it momentarily disoriented me. I murmured agreement as we rejoined the workshop, separating to our respective tables, the air between us charged with an entirely new understanding. The afternoon sessions focused on intricate implementation strategies. I participated actively, engaging with the material, but maintained a steadfast professional distance, neither overtly seeking nor deliberately avoiding the Robertsons. As the workshop concluded, Liam finally managed to approach me directly, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. Still up for coffee? Yes, I agreed, my gaze steady. There's a shop in the lobby. We walked together in silence, the lingering familiarity of his presence beside me, a strange, bittersweet nostalgia. Once seated with our drinks, his usual Americano, my latte, ordered without a single word needed between us, the awkwardness intensified, a thick, palpable tension. Seattle suits you, he finally offered, breaking the silence.
It
does. I agreed, a genuine smile touching my lips. The creative community has been incredibly welcoming. Liam traced the rim of his cup, his eyes downcast. I've been in therapy since you left. He shrugged, a slight, self-conscious gesture. Dad thought it was unnecessary, of course. But it's been helpful. This surprised me. Truly. Liam had always dismissed therapy as paying someone to tell you what you want to hear. I'm glad, I said sincerely, my heart softening with a flicker of the old affection. My therapist helped me understand some things about our marriage, about my family. He met my eyes directly, his gaze earnest, vulnerable. About how I failed to see what was happening to you, because it was easier not to. The acknowledgement was unexpected, disarming, almost heartbreaking in its raw honesty. For a fleeting moment, I glimpsed the thoughtful, capable man I had fallen in love with, a man willing to examine himself, to truly see. Thank you for saying that, I replied quietly, feeling the weight of his confession. I didn't stand up for you, he continued, his voice heavy with regret. Not against Chloe. Not against Mom. Not even against my own ingrained expectations that you would just adapt to whatever the family needed. No, you didn't, I confirmed, without rancor, just stating an undeniable truth. I thought a lot about that barbecue, about Chloe's joke and how everyone laughed. How I laughed. He swallowed hard, visibly struggling. I keep thinking about what you said. Challenge accepted. I didn't understand then what you meant. And now I realize you were declaring independence. From all of us. His voice held equal parts raw admiration and profound regret. We talked for nearly an hour, far longer than the half-hour I'd allocated. Liam shared how the family dynamics had subtly shifted in my absence. Chloe's increased criticism, now extending to his new girlfriend. Eleanor's tightening, almost suffocating control over family gatherings. Robert's palpable disappointment when Liam declined a promotion that would have required him to relocate, to truly break free. I'm seeing everything differently now, he explained, a weary honesty in his voice, like someone adjusted the contrast on a photo I've been staring at my whole life. When our coffee cups finally emptied, we both recognized the natural, peaceful conclusion of our conversation. As we stood to leave, Liam asked the question I'd been expecting, the one lingering in the air between us. Is there any chance for us? Not right away, but eventually. I considered his face, once the very center of my world. I felt affection, compassion, even a whisper of the old attraction, a ghost of what had been. But the tether had been irrevocably severed, not just by Chloe's joke or my sudden departure, but by the entire year of profound, transformative growth that had followed. I think we both needed to become different people, I said gently, my voice kind. And I like who I'm becoming now. He nodded, accepting this truth with surprising grace. You were always stronger than I gave you credit for. We both were, I corrected. You just needed different circumstances to discover it. We parted with a brief, platonic hug that felt less like a goodbye and more like proper closure. As I watched him walk away, I realized I truly, genuinely wished him well in building a life that was authentically his, not just an extension of the Robertson legacy. The final confrontation came unexpectedly, a last dramatic flourish, as I was collecting my portfolio from the conference room. Chloe entered just as I was preparing to leave, her purposeful stride suggesting she'd been waiting, patiently, for this precise opportunity to catch me alone. I need to ask you something, she said, without preamble, her voice direct. And I'd appreciate an honest answer. All right, I agreed, curious despite myself. Did you take this project knowing it was connected to our family? No, I answered truthfully, my gaze unwavering. I discovered the Sheffield-Robertson connection after accepting the Westwood offer. By then, the contract was signed. She studied me, her eyes narrowed, seemingly assessing the very truth of my statement. And you didn't think to recuse yourself once you knew? Why would I? I asked simply, a small, knowing smile playing on my lips. I'm extremely good at what I do, Chloe. This project needed someone with exactly my skills and aesthetic sensibility. The fact that your family company might ultimately benefit from my work is incidental to my professional obligations. So, it's just a coincidence that exactly 1 year after you disappeared, you reappear working on a project connected to us? I had to smile at her persistent, almost childlike, need to control the narrative. Life rarely arranges itself with such perfect symmetry, I replied. But yes, essentially. I don't believe in coincidences that convenient, she countered, her tone sharp. What would be the alternative explanation? I asked, my voice laced with a subtle challenge. That I orchestrated an elaborate year-long plan, building an entirely new career in another city, establishing relationships with agencies completely unconnected to your family, all culminating in this specific project? That would be giving you far more space in my thoughts than has actually been the case, Chloe. The blunt assessment landed visibly. Chloe blinked, perhaps for the very first time, genuinely considering that she might not have been the central protagonist in my life's unfolding drama at all. At the barbecue, she said after a long, quiet pause, her voice softer, almost vulnerable. When I made that joke, it was just a joke. I never thought you'd actually leave. It wasn't just a joke, Chloe, I replied, keeping my tone conversational rather than accusatory, devoid of triumph. It was the articulation of something you'd been communicating for years, that I was dispensable, forgettable, unimportant. I paused, letting the truth hang in the air. And you weren't wrong, in a way. In the context of your family, I was those things. What I needed to discover was that there are contexts where I'm not. Chloe's composure slipped momentarily, revealing something rarely seen beneath her polished exterior, a raw flicker of uncertainty. Liam hasn't been the same since you left. Liam is finding his own way, I replied calmly. As am I. And there's no chance of reconciliation? The question seemed driven by a deeper family concern, a worry for their fractured unit, rather than genuine care for either Liam or me. We've reconciled in the only way that truly matters, I said, my voice firm, yet gentle. We've both acknowledged the truth of our marriage and found peace with its ending. Chloe nodded slowly, absorbing this stark finality. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door, her hand on the frame. Your presentation yesterday, It was genuinely good work. I would have said so regardless of who you were. Coming from Chloe, this professional acknowledgement, unforced and unprompted, represented a fundamental, almost tectonic shift. I thanked her with simple sincerity, neither overvaluing the compliment nor dismissing it. As I left the hotel to prepare for the evening's closing dinner, I felt a strange, profound lightness. I had faced each Robertson individually, navigating these encounters not as the insecure outsider of last year, but as a confident, self-possessed professional with clear, unshakable boundaries. The family that had once loomed so large, so oppressively, in my life now seemed properly proportioned, just people, with their own limitations and complexities.
They were simply people.
The final dinner that evening unfolded with surprising, almost peaceful ease. The Robertsons and the Westwood team were seated at separate, respectful tables, creating a natural distance without any obvious avoidance. When industry colleagues introduced me to Robert as the designer behind Sheffield's brilliant rebrand, he acknowledged my work with a flicker of professional courtesy, a small, almost imperceptible nod. When Eleanor, during a chance encounter at the dessert station, complimented my dress, I accepted graciously, a genuine smile on my lips. Most tellingly, when Chloe's presentation on upcoming marketing trends actually included a slide featuring one of my designs, complete with proper attribution, I recognized it for what it truly was, a public, professional acknowledgement that would have been utterly unthinkable just a year ago. As the evening concluded, I exchanged contact information with several eager potential clients, confirmed next steps with Ethan, and said appropriate goodbyes to industry colleagues. Liam approached briefly, quietly, simply wishing me safe travels and good luck with a sincerity that needed no elaboration. Leaving the venue, I felt no dramatic sense of triumph or explosive closure. Instead, a deep, quiet satisfaction settled over me, the profound peace of having reclaimed not just my professional identity, but my very personal sovereignty. The Robertsons were now simply people I had once known intimately, people who now occupied an appropriate, smaller space in my past, rather than holding outsized, oppressive significance in my present. Chloe's brutal challenge, if you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice, had been not just accepted, but transcended. I had disappeared from a life where I was continually diminished, only to reappear, vibrant and whole, in one where I was truly valued. I had lost a family that demanded my conformity, only to build a community that celebrated my authenticity. I had abandoned a false sense of security that came with painful compromise, embracing instead the thrilling, uncertain adventure of self-determination. Just last week, I had closed on a small, charming house near the water. Nothing grand by Robertson standards, no, but perfectly suited to my needs, to my life, and purchased entirely through my own hard-earned income. As I arranged my carefully selected furniture and hung artwork chosen solely for my own pleasure, I experienced a profound sense of having created not just a home, but a life, genuinely, unequivocally my own. The greatest irony of Chloe's cruel joke was that by disappearing, I had become more visible than I'd ever been, to colleagues who valued my creativity, to friends who cherished my authentic self, and most importantly, to myself. The challenge had been not just accepted, but transformed into an unexpected, precious gift. That evening, as the Seattle skyline glittered, a million tiny stars reflected against the darkening water, I opened my journal and wrote the reflection that had been forming in my soul for months. Sometimes, we must disappear from others' narratives to truly discover our own. The most powerful response to being unseen is not demanding vision from blind eyes, but finding the context where our true selves are not just visible, but celebrated. The opposite of disappearing isn't being noticed. It's becoming so fully present in your own life that external validation becomes utterly unnecessary. The woman who had raised a hot dog in defiant toast 1 year ago could never have imagined the tumultuous, exhilarating journey ahead. The woman writing these words now could never, would never, return to who she had been. And in that transformation lay not tragedy, but triumph. The quiet, sustainable victory of reclaiming one's own life, one breath, one choice, one authentic moment at a time. Now, I'm curious, have you ever had a moment where someone's cruel words actually became the unexpected spark that pushed you to make a life-altering decision? Share your stories below. I'm reading every single comment.